Welcome to Off Watch, our weekly interview series. Now, so far in this series, we've interviewed some big names from the race's past and potentially the future, but it's always nice to get a very honest take of what it was like to step on board your first Volvo Ocean race. So this week I was joined by Emily Nagel, one of the youngest competitors in the history of the race, and what an addition she experienced. All the drama with Team Nobel at the beginning, of course that knockdown in the Southern Ocean, and them taking that record-breaking 24-hour run. If you enjoy this interview series, subscribe for more updates, leave us a like, and of course in the comments we're always taking suggestions as to who we should interview next. Enjoy. Emily Nagel is one of only two competitors in the last edition of the race that was under 24 years of age, one of the youngest sailors that we've had in the history of the race. And along with Team Nobel, currently holds the record for the furthest mile sailed in 24 hours, not only in the VO65, but in the race's history. And of course, she wrapped up the last edition, finishing fourth on board with that boat. Now, that's not a bad start to anybody's ocean race career. But for Emily Nagel, it's not just about the sailing as well. Relying on her naval architecture degree, she's moved into data analysis, cutting through the fog of sailing to reveal the scientific numbers underneath and to help boats get that little bit of an edge. Now, Emily, thank you very much for joining me. I think it's fair to say that comparatively, you've come a long way in a short period of time for most sailors. I mean, you're still pretty young. What was it like? Let me take you back to that very first race village in Alicante, the start of the last edition. What was it like being on the other side of the barrier? The fans, the crowd, the noise on one side, and here you are at a major regatta, and you are one of the stars.
Hey Niall, thanks for having me. That arriving in Alicante and first getting that little glimpse of what it's like to be on the other side was pretty insane, terrifying and exciting, but nothing that I expected. I mean, I remember walking to the race village one morning with Martine and just looking over, and they just put up all the banners, and there was one of me and Simeon grinding, and I was just there like, why is my face up there? Surrounded by all of these incredible legends of the sport, like guys that I'd looked up to for years, and that was my face. It was just a bit of a shock, really.
And I want to get to how you got there, but let me just ask you, do you feel like an ocean racer now? Do you feel like your name should be up there, or does it still feel like you're kind of, walking in a dream?
I'd say it still feels kind of like walking in a dream most of the time. I mean, I've definitely learned a lot and come a long way, but I still look up to these guys who have done, 5 races and they've got so much experience. And I still just felt so lucky to be there during the race, let alone, I don't know, I don't think I could ever see myself as one of the legends the way that these guys are.
Well, I'm sure that there's still some more to come, and I'm sure that luck has played its part, but there was an awful lot of work that you were doing behind the scenes. So let's wind the clock back. I think you've got to go back to Team BDA in Bermuda. This is training for the Youth America's Cup. So you're out there. Bermuda's where you're born, and being there in the right place at the right time is probably the right way to describe it, because I'm imagining at that time, just before the America's Cup, I mean, there were a lot of greats coming through the doors. You were in quite a circus at that moment.
It was pretty crazy to be back in Bermuda. I mean, I'd gone away to boarding school and university in the UK and didn't really have any plans of moving back to Bermuda, just career-wise. There's no engineering, there's not a huge amount of sailing. And then they announced that not only was the Cup going to be in Bermuda, but there'd be a Youth America's Cup and Bermuda would have a team. So I spent my last year of university focusing a little bit too much on that and trying to earn a spot in that team. And then it's literally a couple of days after my last exams, I flew back to Bermuda and joined Team BDA. We were training kind of the whole time, but having that naval architecture, and I wanted to be involved in a real Cup team. Being part of the Youth AC was awesome. I mean, we were getting to train in NACRAs and GC32s and just incredible boats that I'd never had the opportunity to sail, and probably never would have had that opportunity if I'd been in the UK. So that was just crazy in itself. But with the actual cup there, I mean, all of these guys that, you know, I'd kind of grown up watching match race during the Bermuda Gold Cup, and, you know, seen on TV in the last cup and followed, they were all just there. So I kind of made it my personal mission to, you know, work with one of the teams. I didn't care what it was doing. I mean, the dream was to be involved with the design and actively involved, but I would have been happy at that point, you know, just sweeping the floors. And ultimately I managed to get an internship with SoftBank, and that was just a mix of everything from, you know, working with the design team to also helping out the shore boys get the boat ready every day, and just incredible learning curve and getting to meet all of these incredible designers and sailors and boat builders. It's a whole world of kind of professional sailing.
And this is where it got you into the room with the right person, Simeon. So SoftBank, Team Japan, already there's, you know, I'm imagining there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of intensity there. But am I right in saying that you always had a little bit of an eye on the ocean race and trying to do it, and you weren't wasting your time? You know, you were building up your fitness, your skills, and all the rest of it, so that if the right opportunity came along, you might just be able to grab it.
Yeah, I mean, you could say I'd always been a little bit obsessed with sailing and the idea of sailing around the world. I mean, Ellen MacArthur was like my biggest hero when I was 10. And I wanted to do that, but I kind of put that off for years to focus on the engineering and, you know, a real career. And I'd kind of been taught, like, from kind of my schooling that, you know, sailing was a hobby and you have your career. And then just being in Bermuda was kind of like that light switch that it's like, it doesn't have to be separate, it could be combined. And I just started focusing more on, like, getting the miles into my belt. I was lucky enough to do, like, this awesome project with Red Bull.
Oh yeah, the F4.
Yeah, it's so cool and surreal, just going from New York to Bermuda on this foiling cat with Jimmy Spittle and Shannon Falcone and Rome Kirby, and just hearing their stories from, like, their offshore history. I mean, they've got Volvos behind them, plenty of Sydney Hobarts. It's just like that kind of spark that's like, you know what, this is actually doable. Like, it's not as far out of reach as I'd always kind of imagined it to be. And that was around the same time as the rule encouraging more girls to be involved was introduced.
Right. So this is the rule that essentially it doesn't say that you have to have female sailors on board, or indeed if you're an all-female team, you have to have male sailors on board. But there's an incentive if you do. There's a limit for the amount of sailors you can have. If you want to go above that limit, they have to be of the opposite gender.
Exactly. And at that time, like, I'd been talking to loads of the guys at SoftBank about it, and to these guys while we were offshore. And at that point, everyone was still quite hesitant. Like, they're not really going to take 2 girls on every boat, are they? Like, they'll probably do an all-girls team again. But then, you know, there was a couple of characters in there who'd be like, well, actually, you know, they do get 2 extra pairs of hands on the boat, so it kind of seems smart. And there was definitely a lot of debate about it, but it was kind of my point where I was like, you know what, I want to do this. It might not be this edition. Like, let's focus on just getting strong, learning more skills, and just figuring out, like, how to get there. So I focused a lot on the gym side, kind of from coming back from university to join Team BDA. I'd already had to start putting on a lot of muscle to be able to sail the GC32. And pretty much over a course of 8 months, my coach got me to put on 6-7 kilos, which was pretty intense.
Yeah.
But it kind of put me in the spot where I was suddenly able to, you know, lift a lot more weights, and I was spending a lot of time grinding in the gym. Kind of my favorite thing to do would be to, like, I'd come in the morning before work and just look at the board at what the guys had been doing the day before for their grinding workout, and I'd adapt it and try and make it work. And just over time kind of built that up, and the guys started to see I was quite serious about it. And then Simeon joined the team in March, just before the Cup. And at first I was too scared to speak to him.
Of course. Yeah.
That one took about a week to build up the confidence to actually talk to the guy, which in hindsight's pretty stupid because he's like one of the friendliest guys around to talk to. And once he starts talking, he doesn't really stop, which anyone who knows Simeon will agree with. He's a great guy, and like that's why we got on so well. And yeah, it just kind of went for that. I don't think he realized I was serious about the ocean race for a couple of months. The other guys at SoftBank would kind of like make hints at him like, oh, you should take her for a trial. And I think he always saw that as joking, but then kind of about 4 months into me asking questions nonstop about, what do you have to do, skills wise, like how many people do you have in a shorty, and then what sort of backgrounds are you looking for? He just asked me to come for a sail, and as soon as the Cup ended, I flew out.
And I mean, at that point where he asked you to come for a sail, at that point where you finally plucked up the courage to talk to him, had you got good at that point of acting cool? Had you been able to master the ability to say, yeah, a bit of Volvo, or were you still that sort of, bright-eyed about it whenever you spoke about it?
Yeah, I definitely couldn't act cool if I'd wanted to. I remember him asking me to trial, and we'd been packing up the boat. So they'd just been out for sail, and the boat comes into the dock, and I hop on and start taking apart bits and pieces to get it ready to lift out. And that's when he decided to ask me, and there was plenty of people around at that point. I remember I went round to the other side of the wing and ended up like jumping up and down on the trampoline because I was just that excited. And one of my friends just turned to me and was just like, act cool, please. Like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Okay, so you get this amazing opportunity, but of course it's just an opportunity. There's nothing guaranteed at this point. You've been working pretty hard up to it now. So you fly out, you hit the ground. Did you know what you needed to do? Or was it a case of one of those situations where you arrive and you think, I'm in over my head?
I definitely felt way over my head. I mean, to be honest, I thought I was going out for a week-long trial. The plan was to do a transatlantic. I thought, going to go out, going to do this. Realistically, they've already got 2 girls in the team. At this point, they had Martine, they had Annemiek, they had a really strong-looking team. They don't need me. Simeon's just, keeping options open, being a nice guy. Whatever happens, this is going to be an awesome experience and a chance to sail like these epic boats with an incredible group of guys. So just wanted to go out, learn as much as I could. And I think it was kind of that kind of mindset that really helped me, because when I got on board, it was just, I just wanted to learn. And that's what everyone kind of was quite happy with, was the fact, that I was there asking questions, not pretending I already knew what I was doing, which was ultimately what they were looking for. They didn't want someone that they'd have to kind of get rid of bad habits and coming along acting like a rock star, while I was just kind of young, excitable, just wanted knowledge. And yeah, it turned out it wasn't a week. Ended up not leaving for a couple of months. Didn't have enough clothes with me, but
okay, so let's fast forward then to the point where the race is starting. So I mean, I can understand, and you speak about it, and I can hear you can still remember that joy of when all those pieces started to come together, as anybody would do when a dream of yours starts to line up. We get to the start of the race, and of course anybody that was watching closely with the start of the race will know that for those first few days just before leg 1 for Team Max and Abel, it was not smooth. There was obviously some sort of disagreement between Simeon and the managing company. Simeon was taken off the team. He then gets himself back on. And this all happens right at the 0 hour. And I remember seeing some footage of you guys on the boat, and you can see everybody's expression as Simeon's obviously discussing the plan and everything else. And I've wanted to ask you this for so long, but obviously Simeon's experience of it will be one thing. For somebody in the team, you've been chasing this dream for so long. You're right there. You are about to hear the start gun go. Did it worry you in a way that you felt like it was slipping away?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it just all felt so surreal at the time. I mean, we had literally like crossed the finish line of the prologue when Simeon had gotten this call saying, it's over. And it was just, no one knew what was happening for that week. I mean, there was the skipper change, and Simeon had gone back to Holland to deal with the entire mess. And personally, like Simeon was the one who'd brought me into the whole thing. I didn't know anyone else in the team when I started. And so, there's kind of that allegiance to him, but at the same time that I want to start. Like, this is what I've been chasing after, like, my entire life. It's what I've been dreaming of. Like, I want to be on that start line. But you still want it to be with the right people, but you'll do anything to be there. And it's just all of these emotions. And I remember the night before, like, at this point, Simeon had been told, he should be skipper, by the court, but, no one was really sure what was still going on. And even like midnight before the start, we didn't know exactly who the skipper was. And I was just there like, this isn't how I should be spending my night before the biggest day of my life. Like, I was nervous enough to start the race, but to have all of that going on, it was just, are we even going to leave the dock? And then, that next morning that you spoke, like, we go down, we find out that Brad, Yoka, and Jules are going to step out for the race or this leg. We didn't know at that point. And we went down to the boat and we're just sitting there like, can we even leave the dock? Like, do we meet the requirements? And it's like, no, we need at least 2 more people to be allowed to start the race.
Yeah.
So that was all a bit of a, like, we'd gotten the boat ready to go. Like, that had been, Nikolai was boat captain. He had taken that on where it's like, for now, we just focus on, we make the boat ready. The older guys will sort out who's actually sailing. So the boat was good to go. We just needed the people. And, from some good fortune, we had Roscoe, who is an incredible navigator in his own right, stepped up to the plate and took Jules's position. And then we were lucky enough to get Antonio from Scallywag, who is a great guy that I'd actually briefly sailed with before as well. So I'm like, okay, at least I know him. And we were able to start, but it was just that moment of, what are we doing? We were joking amongst ourselves as we were kind of motoring out to the start line, like, yeah, if it's not going well, once we get out the Straits, we could always just turn right and deliver the boat to Portugal. Like, but we're all far too competitive for that. Managed to be the second boat out of the Straits, so turned left and kept racing.
And I mean, like you say, that first leg was, I mean, for so many fans of T-Max and Abel, everything seemed to be, well, if this is how well the boat can perform with one less crew member than you'd planned, obviously some of your key players out, this was a good sign for the future. Did you, when you arrived on the dock after that first leg, were you all thinking, okay, this is, we've got that buzz back, we've got that confidence back?
Unfortunately, I don't think that buzz came until a little bit later. We'd gone to Lisbon, which in itself was a bit of a homecoming because we'd spent so long training there. So at least that was nice. We're back in a familiar place. But we didn't know who else we were going to get in still at this point. Like, we'd been offshore for 8 days. Simeon had been with us, obviously, so hadn't really been able to really be hunting down new crew members. So it was still kind of, we got there, it's like, we've gone here, but we don't have Antonio anymore. what do we do next? We still need to fill these positions. So there's still that week of uncertainty while we were there. And we then got in Curly Pete and Chris Nicholson to take the 2 missing spots, and Jules came back. So it was there was definitely another rush of momentum, but it was still okay. Here we go again, new faces. Let's see what we can do.
And that, I mean, for the start of the second leg, I mean, I remember it well. It didn't let up, did it? I mean, you were straight out into unbelievable downwind sailing. I mean, some of the footage from that was incredible. Obviously, you've got this undercurrent of, Team Axonobel was one of the first teams to announce. You guys had built your own boat. You had all this momentum with you. That gets kind of pulled out from underneath, and you're sort of struggling to get that one back. Just from a personal point of view, how did you fare in that second leg in particular, where I think things probably got pretty real? I mean, the 65, it's a wet boat. It's a hard boat. It's a tippy boat. How were you doing at that point?
It was definitely a learning curve. I mean, that was easily like the longest I'd ever been offshore. I mean, even leg 1 was the longest I'd been offshore at that point. I had no idea how I was going to cope kind of physically, mentally. It was all just unknowns at the beginning. And it was, like you said, it was definitely thrown into the deep end with that start. I mean, it was cool, like blasting out and 30 knots of wind and just sending it. But we didn't have the greatest start. We had managed to lose the J1 bag overboard in the import race. So
yes, I remember,
as soon as we got out, we're there trying to drop the J1, managed to rip the J1, and then didn't have a bag to put it in. So Brad, Luke, and I had to kind of like mangle it downstairs through the hatch and then attempt to fold it up. So then all of a sudden, everything down below is also soaking wet. You've got 30 knots of wind, so everyone's soaking wet. And just downstairs just turned into this humid, just black box. And because the wind didn't drop for days, we still couldn't repair the J1. So it was just kind of that straight into the deep end. Everything that could go wrong at that point did, because we just weren't as prepared as we thought we were. I mean, I remember literally leaving Lisbon, standing behind, I think it was Nikolai driving, got hit by a wave, life jacket goes off. Straight away, like, didn't even last 5 minutes. And it was just because at that point, we hadn't done much sailing in really wet conditions. And I'd seen all the others were just wearing harnesses rather than life jackets. But turns out they go off if you have it on automatic. Learning curve.
And then what about the lessons that presumably any of us would need to learn coming off that incredible adrenaline high of being blasted by 35 knots to the drift, the doldrums, the weight? What was that like?
It was definitely testing. Like before the race, I always imagined that the hardest part was going to be the cold. I grew up on an island. I'm used to warm weather. The hard bit is going to be when it's cold and freezing and it can't warm up. And I found the complete opposite. The doldrums were by far the worst part. Just the heat and the drifting and the feeling that you're just not going anywhere. Like you go down below for 4 hours and you come up and it's like, oh, we're still here? But those guys are still there. Great. And you can't cool down either, because obviously the boats, we don't have fridges or cold drinks, nothing. So you're there literally like in your bunk, just in underwear or thermals, just trying not to die from heat stroke. And you can't even have a cold drink to kind of help that. And your skin doesn't like it. Your body doesn't like it. You feel disgusting. You can't shower. And it was more that mental side of it. We're just like, we're a week in. There's nothing that we can do about it.
I imagine in those sort of situations as well, everybody's fuses are burnt already quite low. Everybody's ready to blow about the smallest little thing, oh, you didn't clean that up, or that's there, or, you know, you've got my whatever wet, was when did you first learn the importance, shall we say, of not annoying each other or not being annoyed by their little ticks as well?
I'd say it was probably leg one that I started to pick up on it the most, but leg two was definitely a test. For me in particular, you know, I was the rookie on board. Like, I was the youngest by quite a lot. No, I don't have a gold medal to my name. I was the newbie. So I was chief baler and snack maker, and, you know, making like Martine and I packed the food for each leg. So we would get a lot of grief if someone had a meal they didn't like. So it was kind of like learning throughout that kind of what makes everyone tick and what's the best way to get people in a good mood. For Nikolai, Haribo and Simeon. Okay. Like, if you come up on deck with a bag of Haribo, they'll be in a good mood for a few hours. With Justin, who joined the team later, coffee and dark chocolate covered coffee beans. It was just like, it's normally food related.
Yeah.
But like, those would make the biggest differences to your watch. Is just, if you could keep everyone happy and on the same page, then things would go smoothly.
I mean, that sounds like potentially the most important role on any boat, really. And I'm imagining it only gets more important as the race continues, because the next leg was the first time into the Southern Ocean. And I remember talking to you in the team's container in Alicante. And I remember asking you, how are you feeling about the Southern Ocean? And you turned to me and you said, I'm excited for the Southern Ocean. So do you want to revise that now?
I remember that conversation. And I remembered that conversation multiple times in the Southern Ocean. And I mean, like, part of it's still true. Like, the sailing down there is incredible. And, you know, there's times when you're surfing down the waves and you're just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Like, waves that are 10 meters high, and just, it is stunning. But it's also terrifying at the same time. And I think that anyone who doesn't have a little bit of fear in them in the Southern Ocean probably has a few screws loose, because it is just so remote. You feel so tiny, and you are having the life beaten out of you by the wind and the waves. I mean, just getting knocked off the pedestal repeatedly. It is freezing cold. Like, the waves are massive, and you are so remote. Like, if something goes wrong, no one's coming to help you. It is all on you.
Well, you talk about being battered by the waves, and of course, you know, I mean, so you take a tumble, and it's a hell of a tumble. You talk us through what happened.
Well, it was a bit embarrassing, really, because we'd only just gone on to the watches. It was literally the start of the race. I mean, at this point, we hadn't even made it to the Cape of Good Hope. We'd kind of just started to set up. We decided we were going to go into our watch systems. Martine had gone down below into the bunk. And Luke had asked me to go get another pair of sheets from down below. I just go downstairs. And at this point, it was pretty rough as we left Cape Town. And like, just nasty waves where it's just not comfortable. You're getting thrown around a bit, and you're kind of blasting along, reaching. So you're heeled over at 20 plus degrees. So everything's already sideways. I was pretty nervous to begin the leg, because, you know, going into the Southern Ocean, building it up in my head a bit. Went downstairs, just kind of digging underneath the bunk to get a set of sheets. We went over a big wave, and I managed to do a backflip over the engine box down below and landed with a longitudinal across my back, which, yeah, it hurt. I've seen the footage from on deck, and I was like, yeah, that's a pretty big wave, and kind of embarrassing how loud my scream was that you could hear it on deck. Kind of by the time I'd opened my eyes, I already had Brad and Jules standing above me, kind of like.
But I mean, for those people that haven't been on board a 65, it's surprisingly cathedral-like downstairs. I mean, when you go down the stairs, because I remember your fall, and then the next time I was on a 65, I remember thinking, if I was in that bunk and then I fell down there, it's a hell of a drop.
Yeah, it's definitely a couple of meters. It's a wide open space. Like there's nothing to stop you. But damn, like later on in the race, definitely a lot more aware of that. I mean,
Yeah,
getting in and out of the bunks, like moving around the boat, it was definitely a lesson in, okay, like it's so easy to get injured. I just needed to be more aware.
Yeah.
But yeah, let it slip for a minute, and I definitely regretted that one because, I mean, I was essentially on some pretty strong ibuprofen for the remainder of that leg. Jules had kind of been like, well, you can stay in your bunk if you want, but you're in your bunk, you can't help out. And I was just like, I can't be that person. So kind of just took the drugs, had a couple hours kind of in the bunk while they kind of decided if it was super serious, just to see if there was any like really bad bruising. It like bruised straight away, so kind of worried I might have damaged something. But I kind of got bored after that, so I am going on deck for my watch. And grinding kind of takes your mind off of it a little bit, but it definitely put me into this. For those first few days, I was definitely kind of spooked. The way I moved around the boat, I was really slow and just, overly cautious at times. Like it's always good to clip on, but there was times where I was doing it. This is probably a bit excessive, and just getting a bit nervous whenever big waves were coming. So didn't start that leg off to the strongest start personally.
Well, I mean, credit to you for staying in the game, because it would have taken a lot less. I mean, I wouldn't have been on the boat in the first place. I wouldn't have even gone down there, but there's by the by. So you've already been sort of dealt a healthy, warning for the respect that obviously the Southern Ocean demands from all of us. Let's then talk about the other big moment for Team Axonabel on that leg, the jibe. The jibe that results in the main track coming off the mast. Where are you for this jibe? Are you on deck at this point? Are you down below? Kind of talk us into it.
Yeah, so I'd actually been on deck kind of for that whole watch leading up to the jibe. We'd been approaching the ice gate and the wind had been steadily building. We had one reef in and it started getting kind of high 30s, and the squall had come in and we're like, we really need to get another reef in here. This is a bit marginal. And so we kind of started preparing to put this reef in, had a bit of trouble getting it in. Can't remember exactly why, but yeah, it wasn't happening. And as we were dealing with that, Jules kind of stuck his head out and was like, we've had a massive shift. We need to jibe or we're crossing the ice gate. I was like, okay, we'll start setting up. And he wakes everyone up down below. They all come up and we start kind of getting things ready. And then it was no, we need to go now. So it's like, okay, we're not putting the reef in. We started to do the stack, kind of took off a couple of ratchet straps, sent a couple of sails to the other side, but didn't have time to finish it. And it was like, no, jibe now. So we set up. I'm on the front pedestal with Simeon. It's kind of my maneuver spot. And we just start the maneuver. And when it's windy like that, we always go, all of us, into the main on the pedestals, grind the main in, and then after the jibe, deal with the front sail. So it's at the point where, we're starting to steer into the jibe, we start grinding, and then just can't move the handles. Like, it's so loaded up, it's just not budging. It's like one of those, like, you compare it to like when you're in a laser or an opti when you're little, trying to jibe, and you go for it, and you're like, it's not coming, and in that instant that yeah, this is not going to go well. But we went for the jibe, and there was a lot of noise, and the boat was pinned over on its side just straight away. So kind of had some sails dragging in the water. Instantly, all the battens had broken. I think it was the top 3 had all gone. And then kind of just looking up, boat pinned on its side, sails just a mess with these because of the broken battens. And then the track just goes boom. And by some miracle stayed attached to the sail at this point. And yeah, it didn't look so great. So we had to, sort the runners out, get the boat back upright, drag these sails that were half in the water back on board. And then it was like, okay, Brad Nikolai, up you go. As we made the effort to get the sail down and managed to recover the track, no longer attached. There's probably a 1.5 meter, 2 meter section of track. Yeah.
I mean, and putting it back on, I'm just trying to think about how I might go about something like that on a VO65. If I could then come into the dock, get the mast out, drop it down, give it a really good clean, no salt water, no grease, no grime, key it all up, all these sort of steps. And you're thinking, right, we've got to glue this back on in what can only be described as possibly the worst place to have to do it. When that happened, every team, I'm sure, has been dealt one of these moments. But when that happened for your team, was it very quick that everyone went, okay, this is our plan? Or was there a little bit of grappling with the enormity of that?
That was the thing. Like, for me, like up until that point, I'd been kind of like this nervous, kind of like spooked horse and on the boat. But as soon as like the issue happened, everyone just kind of stepped it up straight away. Like it was like a light switch had gone and it's like, okay, here's a problem. We fixed the problem. And like full credit to Brad and Nikolai, who were the ones who had to go up the mast to, actually glue this thing on. Nico was on the helm for most of it because he's a bloody good helm. And so kind of Martine, Simeon and I were kind of, managing the pit, helping the guys up who were up the rig and passing things back and forth, just general stuff like that. Jules was making sure we were still going in the right direction. It was all just kind of, everyone knew what needed to be done. You just put in that situation where it's like, well, we're here. There's nothing we can do about it other than fix it. And luckily, I mean, Southern Ocean, the waves did carry us in the right direction. Could have been a lot worse if we were going upwind.
Yeah. And I mean, it's quite remarkable. I remember seeing some of that footage coming in and I mean, it looks tough enough, but I'm sure you can't really convey what it's like being up that mast as it's swinging around. And when you were hoisting the main back onto this track, which you had glued on, ratchet strapped on, I mean, it was almost a textbook how not to glue it on. Don't get it wet. Don't do it in cold weather. All this sort of stuff. When that main was going back on, was there a nervousness?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely, because the first time we hoisted it, it didn't work. So kind of we took 24 hours to do kind of the first set. We'd sanded everything back, we fixed the battens, and I can't remember what it was we used the first time, spar bond, stuck it on, left it overnight. Next morning, it's like, okay, let's try it. Hoist the main, and literally it didn't get much further than like the head car being on, that it just straight off. Like, well, that one's not going to work. Back to scratch. And we knew it was going to be at least another 24 hours before we could send it again. So that was a fairly dark moment when we saw it ping off for the second time. So, it was there like, okay, we've got to make it work this time. So that following morning again, so after kind of 48 hours of this nonsense, we're there hoisting it and it makes it up. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to put a ratchet strap on just for some extra security. It's like, okay, that seems to have worked. I guess we just go. And I wouldn't say the guys really held back at all with the driving. It wasn't really a case of, oh, we should baby the boat, make sure it gets there. It was like, we've got 200 miles, 300 miles to catch up. Let's get to move on.
And so you finish that leg. It's a tough leg. 19 sailors, by my count, get rotated out for various reasons, not least because of everything that you guys have been through. You're one of those sailors. So you've had an injury, you've had a nasty smash. You're now finding yourself not going to do the next legs. Now, most sailors do not want to get benched. How did it come about? Were you aware that, look, this is probably going to happen? I've taken a little bit of a knock. I might need to kind of reassess. Or did you get told when you were on the dock?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a weird one. So after I did my back, I also managed to pop my shoulder out a couple of days after that.
Dislocated it?
Yeah, but it went back in. It was fine.
Fine. It's nothing. Yeah.
It hurt a lot. I was on drugs. I kind of told the guys after a few days, but it wasn't really a big deal, but it was enough that I was in pain from that. I was in pain from my back. I was in this general sense of kind of being overwhelmed from the Southern Ocean. Like, I was still loving it. But at the same time, I was just there like, there's definitely something not right here. And I mean, I wanted to do the whole race. I wanted to do that next leg, but there was definitely a voice in the back of my head being like, you need to recover, like you need to sort your back out, you need to get better. But I was, at that point, I was still so hungry for the race. I was never going to be the one to make that call. Like, if they needed me to do that next leg, I would have been there.
Sure.
No matter like what the pain, I just wanted to sail. But I think Simeon saw that, and the other guys all kind of saw that there was just that little spark had kind of died out a little bit from kind of being injured. And as we were making that final approach to Melbourne, Simeon did kind of take me aside, was just sitting on the rail and being like, look, I think it's better that you take the next leg off, see a physio, get yourself sorted, and come back stronger in Hong Kong. And so I had kind of been expecting it just from kind of like my own personal thoughts. But I was still, I was crushed. Like, all I wanted was to do the whole race. So to not, like, kind of felt like I'd failed a little bit, and that was pretty crushing. So yeah, I kind of got ashore and pretty heartbroken. Kind of the first person I saw was Bianca Cook from Turn the Tide, who's really good mate. Just remember like hugging her on the dock, just being like, I'm off to the next leg. But I was kind of like, took kind of a couple of days to kind of get a plan together. I was there helping them get the boat ready for the next leg. And then afterwards flew to Sydney, which is where I kind of then based myself, just to get myself sorted. I didn't want to fly home and be away from everything. I was just like, I'm going to have a base here. I'm going to go to physio. I'm going to get in the gym, and I'm going to come back stronger. And this isn't going to happen again. I then met the team in Hong Kong, not knowing at that point whether I was doing the next leg or whether I was shore team. It was all a bit of an unknown. I'd been replaced by Cecile Leggett, and like the team had done really well. So it was kind of neither of us knew who was sailing, who wasn't. She'd been under the impression she was doing more of the race. I was under the impression I was doing more of the race. And ultimately it came down to Simeon kind of deciding that, Seal would stay on for another leg, and then I'd come back on in Brazil and do the rest of it from there, which was pretty heartbreaking at the time. I'd kind of gone out with the thought that, I'll back into it. So went back to Sydney, still in contact with the team while they're off sailing, which was quite nice to still have that little help. Like, I was able to talk to Martine while she was doing the leg and just go team. And just, went out to still get stronger. And at that point, kind of my back was starting to feel a lot better. Even when I'd been in Hong Kong, I was still kind of on that edge. And then I got the call being like, yeah, we need you in Auckland. And the team at that point, they were on fire. They just won a leg.
Yeah.
So like the atmosphere was strong, and kind of stepped back in Auckland, had the week, getting the boat ready. And yeah, I got back in.
And like you say, I mean, the team was doing well. I mean, they won that leg. There was a string of podiums. Things started to get up. Let's fast forward then to something that's made sure that Team Axonabel is going to be in the history books for a good many years to come. The 24-hour record. So this is on the transatlantic from Newport to Cardiff. And previously, there's two records that were broken. So you've got the one that was by Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, with Ian Walker as the skipper on a 65. You guys take that. Then there's the one that was on the Volvo 70. I mean, a faster boat. Let's say it, a faster boat. You guys take that. At what point was there ever any discussion on board the boat where somebody said, I mean, we're going quite well here, and things are lining up quite nicely, or was it just a bolt out of the blue?
For me at least, it was completely out of the blue. Didn't really have much notice of that it was actually happening. I mean, like when we left Newport, it was very much like straight out of the cage, like going for it straight away. I don't know, there was just like this little extra spark at the start of that leg. We hadn't done very well in that previous leg, like coming into Newport, and everyone was just so hungry to just do well. So we'd kind of gone out full guns blazing. We took kind of the more southerly route rather than going up north into the cold, which was quite nice because we stayed warm. And then the conditions got pretty full on. And to be honest, those few days of sailing were like really not pleasant. Everyone's just like, it must have been so cool and so much fun. And just that we were wearing crash helmets when we were on deck. Like we always like carry a couple of helmets on board in case you have to go up the rig or kind of for the driver in really bad conditions. But it's bad enough that everyone on deck was wearing a helmet, because just the angle of the waves was kind of coming clear, like just in front of the driver, so it lines up perfectly with the person on the pedestal, which was quite often my job. I wasn't one of the main drivers on board.
No, you were the power. You were the powerhouse.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where we were just not even being able to stay on the pedestal. And it was decided that you would kind of position yourself behind the driver, and then every time you needed to grind the main on, you'd kind of dash out, grind it on, get back up, just because you're just getting flattened over and over again. So the last thing we were really thinking about was records. Like we were just trying to send it and stay in one piece at that point. And really beat Brunel was because we were so close to them. I think it was something like the entire leg, we were never more than 11 miles away from them. So we could always see them. And just wanted to be Langford and Carlo. Like, they've had enough wins, like, let's get this from them. So we just, kept pushing. And then just all of a sudden, like, I think Jules had gotten an email from kind of the race control being like, so it looks like you're on for, getting the 24-hour record for this leg. Then it would be like, and it wouldn't tell us when Brunel had set the record.
Yeah, of course. So you can't, because you can't.
Yeah, no. So at this point we had no idea, but then later found out, we'd been alternating back and forth who had the speed record. But we were like, okay, cool, that's great to know. We'll just keep on sailing. And then all of a sudden it just started being like all of these media requests. It's been like, oh yes, it looks like you're going to break the old 65 record, that you're going to get Ian Walker's record. And it's like, okay, cool, we'll just keep sailing. And then Jules kept getting asked, can he check, the distance he's sailed on the computer? Like they wanted the logs, and it's just getting a bit weird, really. And I remember like one watch, Justin jokingly being like, "Oh, well, we could do 600 miles." And I kind of thought it was joking at the time. And then the next watch, it was a case of, yeah, no, media want Jules and Chris and Martine on standby for when we break 600 miles. And I was like, okay, can the wind die now? Because it's literally it was about 48 hours of just relentless getting smashed. And at that point, I was like, okay, cool, this is all fantastic, but I'd really like to sleep. Because at that point, you're just in your bunk, headbutting the ceiling, like just no sleep. Food was a nightmare, and going to the bathroom was just stress.
But a very nice thing to walk away from the race with around your neck.
I mean, it was pretty surreal. Like you got in and they had a banner, and it's like, oh, we actually did something. Like Brunel might have got the win, but we got the record.
I think a nice summary of everything that we've kind of talked about so far is the fact that, like I said at the beginning, you have come a long way in a short time frame compared with most. I mean, and it's something that, I'm sure you're proud of. The interesting thing for me is that you get on board the, Team Axel Nobel, or you're on board with Jimmy Spithill on board the F4. You've done some really cool sailing, and I'm sure you've learned a lot from those people, and you've been the one taking instruction. What you do now with the data analysis and the science, I mean, is it as like I imagine it, where you go into a room and you're talking to some of the best sailors in the world and you're saying, no, look, I respect your opinion, but my spreadsheet says you should have tacked.
It's really weird. Yeah, it was definitely initiation by fire, because I kind of got into this kind of the data analysis side only just like a year and a half ago. It was kind of after the Volvo. I was like, okay, what's my next skill, like my side skill going to be? Like, I love the naval architecture, but I don't want to be in an office. So I kind of, like, Jules had actually proposed it to me. It's like, I think you might be interested in this, like have a look. And it's kind of, yeah, that seems pretty cool. I understand it. Nice way to kind of combine the technical with what I already know, and kind of going like forwards. I was like, okay, I'll try and get into sail GP. Like, it's boats that I absolutely love. I'm familiar with it, and it would just be so cool to work with them. And then, the first event I just interned. I wasn't with any team in particular, and then Draper offered me a spot with the British team. Like, okay, this is terrifying but awesome. And it was just incredible how, because the teams are so small, you are literally just sitting with the sailors and the coach. So it would be myself and Coach Joe sitting with sailors and literally just going through numbers and be like, yeah, so I think you could do this better. And for me, that I'm not great at confrontation. And especially when it's so many guys that I've got so much respect for as sailors. I mean, I was really lucky with the fact that my first year it was Dylan Stew, kind of as helm and flight controller, because they were just as eager to learn. So I could kind of go to Joe and be like, look, I saw this, I think this could be changed. And he would be the one to then kind of use good words to explain it to them. But it was still just so surreal just being involved in that. And then that's just taken another skyrocket this year with Ainsley stepping in. So now it's kind of, I sit in the debriefs with Ben Ainsley and Paco and Goobs, and just like, okay, I'm terrified, but this is my job. Let's see how they take it. And I mean, they're all great at kind of having a lot of respect for kind of what I do and the numbers. And so it is kind of nerve-wracking when I present my ideas, but they're also very hungry for more information. So at least I feel like I'm being useful.
And will we see you back out on the ocean race at any point? Do you still have that spark that you were talking about before?
I'm going crazy in lockdown. I would love to be back offshore right now. And yeah, there's definitely plans for, trying to get back out there. I did have kind of a full kind of year of sailing plans, which unfortunately, put on hold right now. But yeah, I can't stay away from the water, and I'm definitely not the person to stay at a desk all day. So I'll be back out there.
Well, that's very good to hear. That's very good to hear. All right. Well, Emily, thank you very much for talking. It's lovely to speak to you again. And yeah, we'll see you on the water soon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always fascinating to hear from the sailors about just what life was like on board the boats in those crucial moments during the last edition of the race. If you enjoy this interview, subscribe for more, leave us a like, and in the comments below, leave us a suggestion as to who we should be talking to next, and most crucially, what questions you want to hear the answers to. And we'll see you next time.